down memory lane here a little bit. The blizzard of 1888. There's not a better one to start with, because this was as close to a winter hurricane as New Jersey, New York has ever experienced. 2-story drifts in midtown Manhattan. People died in the streets of Manhattan, and they found them underneath the drifts. Many lives lost out at sea. Hurricane-force winds with several feet of snow, up to 4 feet of snow, up the Connecticut and Hudson River valleys. Temperatures around 10 degrees Fahrenheit. It started as a Sunday evening rainstorm on the 8th of March. By the next morning, it was 10 degrees with a raging blizzard in New York. And due to the counterclockwise spin, and remember you bring warm air up, it was raining in Boston. This storm was the granddaddy of all nor'easters, winter nor'easters. This is a train derailment in a gully that was just filled with snow, and the train came into it and derailed. I believe that's up in towards Sussex County area. It was a real active time in the late 19th century. Here's a drawing of a major nor'easter in 1889 along the Jersey shore up in Long Branch. Could have zipped through a lot of these pretty quick. Asbury Park. I don't have the exact date for this storm, but major storm doing damage to piers and boardwalks and houses and businesses right at the shore. The 1944 hurricane mentioned was the greatest damage from a hurricane in New Jersey in the 20th century. As I said, since 1821, quite likely. And you can see up and down the coast from Atlantic City to Asbury Park and LBI and Harvey Cedars, who we'll see again in a moment in between. Just see how the piers are ripped apart, the boardwalks are ripped apart, and how this is actually Back Bay, and you see the sands are just pulled down and just covered Long Beach Island and destroyed many, many a home. Now this one, threw in here for a good reason. This was a devastating storm which brought the strongest winds on record to Newark and New York City. And it flooded both the Raritan Bay, it flooded major flooding down on Delaware Bay and along the coast, trees down from the winds everywhere. And look where the storm was. Pittsburgh had a couple feet of snow in that storm. At the same time, it was raining in Buffalo, because look where the storm was. And Buffalo was getting southerly winds, but Pittsburgh was in an area getting storm winds. But this was just a really wild storm. Early in November in 1950, a tremendously memorable storm for the Ohio Valley and East Coast. But it wasn't a nor'easter. It didn't come up the East Coast. So lesson learned. You can have major storms without having them be these coastal storms here in New Jersey. It was just a monster of an unusual storm. March 62, Long Beach Island took the brunt of this. This was a slow-moving nor'easter coming up the coast, brought very heavy snows inland into the foothills of the Appalachians. But along the coast, with these nor'easters, when you get a storm surge from a hurricane, it's usually in and out in 6 hours, 12 hours. But these nor'easters can traipse up the coast. And you get a high tide, and all the water's pushed, a mini storm surge, if you will, towards the shoreline and back into Barnegat Bay and all. And then by the time the next high tide arrives, the water from the previous one hasn't all left. So the next high tide is a little bit higher, and the next is a little bit higher. And by the time several days passed with this 62 storm, Long Beach Island was underwater. And it was even underwater for a good portion of the low tide time. And at Harvey Cedars, it became Long Beach Islands. The island was ripped in half, and they had to bring in tires and trucks and sand and gravel to fix the suture there. So this is the ocean just meeting up with the bay right across the northern part of Long Beach Island. And this is Long Beach Island at high tide. This was the worst nor'easter in the last century, at least, in New Jersey. This is the one everyone looks back to when they talk about 20th century nor'easters. Then moving on to Floyd. This is a case where the coast was like, you live in Long Beach Island, it was a little windy, little bit of a high tide, not a lot of rain. But this was a hurricane up until the mouth of Delaware Bay, the evening of the 16th of September. And by that time, most of the damage had been done, so I call it Hurricane Floyd. Now, as it went up along the Jersey coast, and there's some debate whether the eye ever reached land, it was tropical storm. But most of the 8 to 12 inches of rain that fell in central and northern New Jersey fell during the daylight hours of the 16th when the storm was still down coming up the Delmarva Peninsula just offshore. But we're talking 8 to 12 inches of rain over parts of central and into northeastern New Jersey, less to the south and a little bit less to the northwest. But it led to the worst flooding on record in the Raritan Basin. Buildings burned down to the first floor in Bound Brook. First floor didn't burn because it was underwater. Then, this was the last big snowstorm nor'easter. I call it the stealth nor'easter, and it brings tears to my eyes. Because that storm was a Saturday into a Sunday, and by the next Thursday, all the snow had melted. But it did dump a lot of snow to shovel, and it laid down a mantle of white. This is snow cover on land. The snow line was right about here. So those aren't clouds from the storm. This is the aftermath of the storm when 1 to 2 feet of snow was on the ground. But as soon as that storm stopped, boom, the sun came out and snow melted away back in February. There was the storm this past April. A rather remarkable storm, I might add. This is the Millstone River flooding in Manville, and this is flooding, and yet again, a house burned to the water line in Bound Brook again. But these are shots I took in Manville, and notice that's a traffic light. Right there, that's the southern end of Manville. I was standing up on the railroad bridge, if anybody knows that area. I think these flags and all that got put in, you'll see them coming in the south end town. That was a redevelopment program with a lot of money that came into Manville after the '99 flood. So at least we got flags out for this flood. This was the second worst flood on the Raritan River in over the last century. Something odd going on? I don't know. The Delaware Rivers had 3 of its 7 worst floods in over a century, all within the last 4 years. So maybe something's going on. But what's unusual about this, we went back and looked at memorable Jersey rainstorms, and this was a stem-to-stern rainstorm for New Jersey. We calculate that this was the 7th biggest dump of rain on New Jersey in the last century. And all the other top 20 were in the mid to late summer and early fall. What's that mean? Well, warm water evaporates easier than cold water. So it's easy to get a lot of moisture out of the ocean and dump it on land in the late summer and the early fall. The ocean's still cold here. The fact that we got that much moisture to drop 6, 8, 9, in some cases 9 inches of rain across the broad part of the state in April is really odd. Really, really odd. That's what made this an unusual storm.